Having a pivot table with multiple headings, as we have here, using the employees underscore multiple rows as our working example, allows us to explore subtotaling in our pivot table. Now, grand totals are turned on by default in pivot tables, and you will always see them across the bottom. Here we are, grand total. And here it's adding up the total salary and the total number of employees, count of the ID. Now, if you don't wish to have grand totals, then that's a simple option change in the pivot table options. So within the pivot table, with your pivot table tools ribbon and analyze activated, we go across the pivot table on the left here and choose options. In the totals and filters, we can remove the tick that says show grand totals for rows and show grand totals for columns. Now, in the case of our example, there are no row grand totals because we don't have any column headings, but there are grand totals for the columns. So I can take that tick out. OK. And if we look at the bottom, there is now no grand total for each of the columns. There is, however, subtotaling that is occurring here at the Durham level and at the marital status level. So if I expand that out, you can see that there is subtotaling for the marital statuses and subtotals for the town. Now, if you don't wish to have subtotals, because again, like the grand totals, they're on by default, then this is an option under the particular field. So in this case, the town. So we need to make sure that that town is selected, and on the pivot table tools ribbon, we can select the field settings. Now we can activate this dialog box also from the right click and choose field settings. And in here, you'll see subtotals are down as automatic. So the subtotal is automatically deciding to A, have a subtotal, and B, what function to carry out. And in this case, it's going for sum because we chose to sum the salary. At the lower level, it assumes you want to do the sum all the way up. So we choose none and OK. And then you'll find there are no subtotals at the town level. So if we expand out Hartlepool, there's no subtotals. But when it's compressed, there is. So again, Leeds, no subtotals, but compressed, there is. Otherwise, we'd have no values in this column at all. So effectively, once you expand out, there is no need for a subtotal because there's no values there. The values are then denoted by the sub-levels. So in this case, the marital status and the gender. Now, if we wanted to lose the subtotals for the marital status, again, we select that particular field, field settings, and let's choose that as none. And then there are no subtotals occurring here. So once the data is expanded, there are no subtotals used at each of the marital status levels. So that's a field setting to decide whether you would like subtotals. You could also retain the subtotals, but ask them to work out something different. So for our marital status, let's go into the field settings and choose a custom function. And let's say we'd like to average. So the subtotals are actually going to average the salaries rather than sum them. That's OK. And you can see then we get a different set of numbers. Obviously, 38,000 is the same as the total of one person because it's one person. But when we get to single, there are 9 people that are female and single in Durham, and then their average has a number of decimal places. So the field now working out the average has a number of decimal places and probably could do with a bit better formatting. So we need to format these subheadings, these subtotals. Now, although we're averaging, this value really is still driven by the field over here, which is the sum of the salary. So value field settings is where the formatting must take place to number with 2 decimal places. OK, OK. And you can see then things look much better. Now, our only problem here by changing the subtotals to average is it's also averaging the ID because we're subtotaling at the same level. And then that doesn't make sense, the 52.111, because we want to count the number of people, not average their IDs. So you have to be a little bit careful when looking at changing what the subtotal does. So I'm going to go back into the marital status, field settings, and we'll return it to none rather than automatic. Automatic will be sum and OK, and we then lose the subheadings. So we are in control of the grand totals that appear either at the bottom of each column or at the end of each row, and we're in charge of the subtotals. We can either turn them on or off, or we can change what function they carry out. So they don't have to carry out the same function as the data values that are being dragged in. So our data values are summing the salary. That's not a requirement for the subtotal. The subtotal could, as we've seen, work out an average or work out a min or work out a max. Any of the other Excel functions that we're used to.